Good afternoon. Welcome. My name is Catherine Bertini. I'm a distinguished fellow at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, and I'm delighted to be welcoming you here today. This session, a solution session called Building Africa's Capacity and Human Capital, is part, of course, of our 2017 Global Food Security Symposium, an expanded symposium because we're expanding now beyond the one-day jam-packed day tomorrow. So before we get started, the first order of business on behalf of the Council and all of us is to thank KL Gates for their support because they're providing this wonderful space for us today. And in particular, I'd like to thank Sang-Yul Lee, who is a partner of K&L Gates based in Chicago and who is counsel to the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, and David Case, who is the managing partner here in the DC office. So thank you both very much. Also, I'd like to thank our partners for this discussion, Grow Africa and the African Leadership Network. Where are you? Thank you. And I want to acknowledge and thank our next generation rapporteurs, Kelsey Bachenberg and Victor Floro. Where are you? Please. Thank you. So their job in this session is to capture today's themes and outcomes, and we'll share them after the event. This discussion is on the record. Please feel free to use social media. We are live streaming this event. Our Twitter hashtag is what's the sign? Hashtag, thank you. All it has is that thing, hashtag Global Ag. And I tweet, by the way. And our Twitter handle is @GlobalAgDev. Please, though, do remember to silence your phones. For nearly a century, the Chicago Council on Global Affairs has provided an independent, nonpartisan platform for a variety of different voices to promote deeper global understanding and an active UN engagement in the world. We're really proud of our work, especially in agriculture development, which brings us here today because not only has the Council been involved on the domestic level with agriculture policy, but also since 2008 with international agriculture development. We're very proud of that work, and we're proud to extend it to be able to include discussions like this one that we're having today. It's important for the Council that I make a disclaimer. Views expressed by individuals we host are their own and do not represent institutional positions or views of the Council. We look forward now this afternoon for a lively conversation on how to attract and train Africa's next generation of leaders. In an increasingly global society where the demand for food is matched by a need for financial and human capital, how can the public and private sectors enable young people? Before we begin, also I'd like to explain the afternoon's format. As you can see from the agenda, we have a panel discussion with audience Q&A, then a flash talk, and then a short conversation and audience Q&A. Our first panel here assembled now includes Euler Brople, who is the founder and managing director of Vested World, Haula Ramdi, an investment director at Investiture Partners. You can do better than that, I think, than I can. David Ruscio, who is the CEO of Farm Concern International, and Sharon Smickel, who is an independent journalist, and she will moderate this discussion. After this panel completes its work, we'll move on to the next. So please join me in welcoming our panelists today.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm so pleased to join our panel and the audience for this important and timely discussion. I'm going to start by posing a question to each of the panelists, and then we'll move on to perhaps more interactive discussion. So the question I'm going to start with is with David. My question is, David, how is the agriculture section emerging as an opportunity, not only for the next generation, but for the continent as a whole?
Thank you, Sharon. My name is David, as already introduced. Well, I think those of you who have had interaction with Africa, you know Africa is not a country. Africa is many countries with different contexts, right from the Maghreb, the Mediterranean Sea, to the Sub-Saharan Africa and down to the south. And there is, however, in Sub-Saharan Africa, a very dominant trend. Africa is also very agricultural. Our people in Africa have always been growing crop, and it's a place we find it in our culture, in our song, in our everything. So agriculture is the main thing among the African people, and that has been so for generations. However, this is also a continent of about 1 billion people, and agriculture is still grossly underinvested. The investment that goes towards agriculture is limited. You may want to know that 6% is only 94% of African agriculture is rain-fed. We grow on open sun, and that's it. Only 6% is under irrigated agriculture. That demonstrates a very significant underinvestment. It's also important to appreciate that most of the farmers in Africa are smallholder, subsistent farmers who have always grown crop without appreciating the science of crop breeding, the science of mechanization and technology, and so on. And therefore, Africa remains to be having quite a potential ability to grow forward, but with very limited chance of doing it because of low investment. But all is not doom and gloom. There is emerging opportunity to invest in African agriculture that is intentional, that can be able to build, the market is enormous. We import arguably about $50 billion US worth of food annually, and that gives an opportunity for investors to invest in African agriculture that has a local market within African continent. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Bueller, you changed careers to devote your time and attention to invest in emerging African businesses. What kinds of entrepreneurs or businesses attract you, and what gaps do you see?
Thank you. So I think it makes sense to start with the gaps. One of the things we recognized was there's this huge gap, as David said, in financing available to entrepreneurs in these markets. So Sub-Saharan Africa, parts of Southeast Asia and Latin America. And so what I really wanted to try to address was how do you bridge that gap between microfinance and what banks and traditional investors are willing to do. So there's this gap between $100,000 and somewhere around $2.5 million. And so that's the gap we really wanted to address. The other gaps that we really started to focus on more and more is import substitution. As David said, the continent imports up to more than $50 billion worth of product that they consume each year. And that's a huge market opportunity. If you can supply food to people and sell it to them at fair prices, that's a huge economic opportunity that we wanted to capitalize on. The other is value-added post-harvest processing. So Africa exports a lot of raw commodities and don't add a lot of value to it. A great example is in the cocoa industry, where West Africa grows close to 70% of the world's cocoa, but only gets 2% of the value in that industry. So those are the gaps that we wanted to address. As far as what we look for in entrepreneurs, they need to be in the right geography where we're investing. So we focus on Anglophone countries primarily. And they need to be in the right industry. So agribusiness, consumer products, and what we call enabling technology. So to what extent can someone in ag or consumer products leverage technology to be more efficient or scale their business faster? And then the entrepreneur, that's kind of the most important thing that we look for. Those people need to be passionate about what they're doing. They need to have a realistic vision of what they can achieve. They need to be flexible, not really stuck in their ways, and willing to take advice where it's appropriate. And they have to have integrity. We're investing at a stage where a lot of things can go wrong, and we need to trust the people that we're investing in, because they're day-to-day running the businesses. And so those are the key things that we look for.
Thank you. Hala, you come from a more mature social impact fund established in 2002. How can an impact investor add value to a small or medium-sized enterprise?
Thank you, Sharon, for the question. I work for Investisseurs et Partenaires, which is an impact investment fund based in Paris, in France, but with offices in sub-Saharan Africa. And the way we see the value add that we can have in SMEs can be summarized in 3 main points. The first one is that those entrepreneurs that we are financing, they are not only looking for money, they are also looking for people to partner with, because those entrepreneurs, they find themselves most of the time alone when it comes to take some big decision, like finance decision or marketing decisions. So we play the role of counselor and advisor to those people. The second value add that we can have is that usually as an impact investment fund that is different from the commercial funds, we have a technical assistance facility that we can use for training or for capacity building. And the third value add that for me is the most important is that when we invest in companies, we ask them, we take into account 3 investment criteria. So when we invest in them, we ask them for a minimum of reporting. Also, we ask them for audited financial statements, and we may ask also for a board seat. So all of these encourage the SMEs to be more organized, more structured, and have a better governance.
Thank you. Our next round of questions will be posed to the entire panel. So now I think we can get a conversation going. The first question is, are you seeing examples of governments enacting policies intended to integrate young people into the agriculture and food sectors? How is that happening, and are those policies effective? So I'll let you, anyone here.
Well, again, I must point out here that unlike the other parts of the world, Africa is having a population that is becoming younger and younger in average. When we are worrying about aging population in Europe and in Japan and so, in Africa, we're getting younger and younger, to the point that some countries will be having an average age of 25, 18 to 25. That's a big deal, because we've a big group of young people. However, as I talk about government, it's important to note that unemployment among young people is a big challenge, and that poses a very unprecedented challenge to governments of Africa. And that's important to note, because if you have unemployed youth, then you have an opportunity to join criminal gangs, to join terror groups, etc. in very fragile states. That's where terrorism is thriving. And that, again, governments of Africa are not rich, they are fragile, they are delicate. There are many that are trying to do policies that are reflective of that need, or rather that very crucial challenge. One, for example, in the government of Kenya in East Africa, where 30% of all government business will be done, it's a policy. If you are procuring goods, you've got to have 30% allocated to the youth as defined by the AU. And that seems to be bringing some enthusiasm among youth. But I must stress here that the youth of Africa are not being included in the development we really are seeing. The growth of GDP in Africa is impressive, but it's not very inclusive. Where I work in Farm Concern International, we have endeavored to develop each communities through a business monitoring we call the commercial villages that integrates youth into business, making clear that the opportunities for the youth are safeguarded and availed to youth people, because in doing so, then you stem the possibility of very fragile communities that have youth that can go to criminality or even the worst deal, as you know, the emerging challenge of terrorism. I think that's one. Number two, many states are coming, many governments in Africa are coming to understand that you can invest in infrastructure and in industry and so on. But if you do not really isolate very intentionally investment that targets ability to integrate youth in the economic mainstay, then you're going to have very unstable states subsequently. I think that's an emerging discussion, and as you know, in the AU and other forums, in the African Development Bank, they have a determination and a focus to have an agenda to get youth in mainstream business so that you can reduce unemployment. We have about 12 million in Africa of youth that come out looking for jobs in training institutions, employable people. But Africa generates about 3 million to 4 million jobs every year. That gap ought to be bridged. I think there is a need for concerted understanding and focus to integrate youth into employment and into investment that do generate them opportunities. And that's what we hope can be a debate for today as well. Okay.
It seems like governments are trying to do more and more now. I just came back from Rwanda earlier this week, Rwanda and Kenya. And in Rwanda, met with the Minister of Youth, and they are now putting together a formal program where they're bringing people from Singapore and other developed world countries to meet with youth who are interested in opportunities within ag and ICT and the intersection of those two industries. And so that's encouraging. The reason I was there was a program between the UN and the Indian government called CETA, and where they were bringing together a group of women entrepreneurs to teach them about the industry, more about the industries that they're in, how do they export if they have businesses in that sector, how do they attract financing, and those types of programs are encouraging to see. But it seems like one of the biggest gaps remains the financing element of it, and also to some extent know-how about how to operate within an environment where there are going to be challenges and obstacles that you encounter, whether it's regulatory, whether it's trade barriers, whether it's access to finance. And so there needs to be more done. Various people are trying to address this in different ways, but I think there's a lot more we can continue to do to help encourage more youth to pursue opportunities in agriculture and show them that it can be both rewarding personally and lucrative for them if they do that.
What about sort of on-the-ground practical policies, seed certification, for example, and that sort of thing? If you have those consumer protections, if you will, in place, does that help reassure young people that this is a stable career that would be supported by extension and the infrastructure that's needed? Is that?
From what I've seen, there needs to be more work done from that point of view. I know organizations like Agri are working hard with the government with respect to seed certification specifically. We're now looking at a deal, David and I were talking about this earlier, where it's veterinary services and vaccines for animals, and the government again controls what's allowed in that market. And so there's some concern from that business about what risks there are if they develop a product. Is it going to be allowed in the country? Will they be able to sell it? Can they project into the future how long they can sell this product without any interventions from the government? So it is an issue that still needs to be resolved.
Paula, do you have thoughts on this question?
Actually, I would like to take an example of Morocco about the enacting policies and give some concrete examples of what government can do. So agriculture in Morocco is very key for the economy. It employs more than 37% of the workforce and contributes only for less than 20% in the GDP. And the government has adopted what we call the Green Morocco Plan, which has started in 2008, will finish by 2020. And this plan aims at increasing the yields of the agriculture, and also to encourage more farmers to shift toward crops and agriculture that has market demand. So the policy that it's implementing to attract more youth to agriculture is providing subsidies to the equipment, especially to irrigation equipment, because water is key for agriculture. And for example, in Morocco, less than 20% of the arable lands are equipped with irrigation. So these subsidies are very important, and they can vary between 80% and 100%. And this specific measure attracts a lot of entrepreneurs to the agriculture sector. And this plan is subsidized by many governments and also by the World Bank, for example.
Yeah, maybe on the same front, I think it's important to know that the youth in sub-Saharan Africa particularly are not the youth we had in the 80s and the 90s. They are very switched on youth. They are globalized in thinking, and they can uptake the challenges that are a little bit globalized. However, it's important to note that any opportunity given to the youth of Africa must be really deliberate. It's not it being open for them to fight it out with the rest. And I'm talking about artisan level, being AI assistants, being able to do extension, and so on. The truth is, because of the poverty that has been in the past, there was a view to look at agriculture like an option for not having something great to do, and that's the farming and the farm. But at the moment, I think that change ought to take place by having deliberate programs that do take up youth into opportunities of business and employment within the agricultural sector at a certain level, even and I'm saying that because there's a need to encourage a more scholarly approach to agriculture, studying a degree and beyond, which is excellent, but that's not where the majority of the youth are. They need to be given opportunity at a lower level where they can be able to engage in agriculture, and that needs to be deliberate and targeted by investors and any social investor or change agent in sub-Saharan Africa. Thank you.
We'll move on to another question, but we could spend the rest of our time on that one. Formal education and training opportunities of different types are incredibly important to supporting young people in their bids to seize opportunities. What are some of the most effective approaches or programs you've seen deployed in efforts to attract young people to agribusiness? What are the effective ones?
I will continue with the Moroccan
Okay.
So in Morocco, the training in agriculture is part of this Green Morocco plan. This education system is based on three main pillars. The first one is the high education in agriculture. In Morocco, we have three institutes that train the future engineers. There is also the technical agriculture training, which is provided in more than 45 institutes that are spread out in the whole country. And there is more than 2,600 people that benefit from this training. And this technical training can start also at the high school level, especially for high schools that are in the rural areas. And the third part, which is very important, is apprenticeship. This apprenticeship aims at attracting the young people that are dropped out from school, because it's a very big phenomenon in rural areas in Morocco. So with this apprenticeship, the aim is to attract those people to the workforce, or to prepare them to run farms that were already run by their parents. And this apprenticeship benefits to more than 10,000 young girls and boys every year.
Interesting.
Some of the programs we've seen and have been fortunate enough to be involved with, one is it's not directly related to ag training, but it's related to business training. It's Stanford University has a program called SEED, and they have campuses set up both in Nairobi and in Accra, Ghana, where they teach young entrepreneurs really fundamentals on how to manage and run their businesses. And professors from Stanford visit with these entrepreneurs over the course of a 6-month period. And then they have coaches that are assigned to work with them to implement the things that they learn during those sessions. So that's an extremely great program that Stanford's running. Another that we've seen and are starting to work with is a program that's a partnership between a number of global food businesses. So it's called Partners in Food Solutions. And it's a partnership between Cargill, General Mills, Hershey's, Bueller, forgetting one, I'm sure. But they allow members from within the companies to work with entrepreneurs in developing countries with various technical aspects of their businesses. So that's a really effective tool for helping share technical knowledge on anything from food processing to packaging, distribution, and things like that. I think to step back a little bit, that the whole debate between formal education and whether it's more informal or vocational training, I think to put things in perspective, I like to compare Asia's development with Africa's development. And when you look at countries in Asia, countries like South Korea and Taiwan, at the start of its development, so in the 40s, 50s, 60s, when you look at literacy rates in South Korea and Taiwan, I think in South Korea it was less than 45%. In Taiwan it was, I think, around 50%. And those countries' literacy rates, if we're going to use literacy rates as a measure for how educated the population is, didn't really start to take off until those countries that were well on their path towards developing. And so there's an argument to be made that formal education really isn't the answer to addressing the problem. Maybe controversial, but there's some indicators to say that. What was more important was vocational training and teaching specific skills related to the industries that those countries were trying to develop. And so each of those countries, it was agriculture and manufacturing. And so I think there's an argument to be made that vocational training is a much more effective tool for helping address some of the issues in African countries.
Perhaps thank you for that. The government of Ethiopia, in partnership with the Canadian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, has a campaign to equip the technical vocational institutions in agriculture and to be able to hold young people to begin agricultural enterprises. And I think that's very remarkable. One of the ways they do it is to expose them in the region within Eastern and Southern Africa, to expose both the trainers and in ways they can be able to benefit from other examples of where such has been done. Where work, Farm Concern International has been a partner to expose the trainers in order to uphold youth in agriculture. I think that's very remarkable. In Tanzania, the government of Tanzania and with assistance or partnership with other organizations, there is an ongoing ability to have an incubation for agricultural enterprises that are run by young people. I think that thinking that Yura has underscored of vocational level being the emphasis is what will unlock agricultural potential in Africa, because the youth who are growing in thousands and thousands are really needing that level of education for them to get into enterprise. And I think there are every government is trying to do it in a smaller way. Perhaps the best would be to mobilize everyone to help the African governments and people to focus on that level of the youth in handholding young people to get into agricultural enterprises.
Many young people I've met in both East and West Africa are living in the cities, but they feel connected to the countryside because typically their homes were in the countryside. Is it possible to lure them back to the countryside, or maybe at least to engage them in enterprises that involve the output of the countryside?
Yeah, Africa is made of villages. Everyone comes from some village somewhere.
Yeah.
Perhaps there are very few people who really call the towns their home. They always return back for festivals, for marriages, and so on. And the reason why people, unlike the European Industrial Revolution that pulled workers to town, there are no industries that are growing that rapidly in African cities. So they just go to look for opportunities that are not there. So you grow up slums. You may want to know that some living in African cities is poorer than the rural countryside. And so the only reason why they go to towns is because of lack of opportunity to engage in economic activities. If we were to engage in building enterprises, ability to connecting them to the market, opening up areas for economic development, then there will be a migration back to the rural countryside. And that's happening in many of the African countries where there is an attempt to do that. You're absolutely right that there is always a need to finish school so that you can opt to the next bus to go to town to look for opportunity, because that's how we are taught. Maybe to just make a statement, when the British and the French ruled African countries, we were taught that if you want to be successful, you got to finish school, go to town, get a white-collar job, and be successful. Now, of course, that is, as we all know, that has been overtaken by time. But without opportunities in the rural countryside, with the poverty in the rural countryside, we continue getting towns crowded by people looking for opportunities. Maybe I think, and Yura is right, our time has come, and if we were able to build targeted opportunities that are deliberate by investors, by social, governmental, and otherwise, bilateral, multilateral, that target youth in their rural countryside, it will open up economies, and there will be a migration back to the rural countryside, I believe, and that does seem to be happening in some instances.
That sort of loops back to what Euler was talking about in terms of vocational training.
That's correct.
I think we have time for one more question before we take questions from the audience. And the one that I'm going to ask is one that David especially has already spoken to. But it's important enough in these times that I think we'll conclude this part of the conversation with this question. The youth bulge often is talked about as an impending threat. But another perspective is to see this new generation as the fuel for development. As three people deeply involved in building businesses that will support food security in the coming decades, what is your perspective on this debate? Is the youth bulge an impending threat, or is it a new opportunity for us?
I think it could go either way in the next.
That's true.
I mean, it's a huge opportunity. I'm a glass half full kind of guy, so I think it's a huge opportunity, and we need to capitalize on it. Again, I mean, when you look at a lot of these countries, anywhere from 60 to 80% of the population is engaged in agriculture, even though literacy rates, meaning in a country like Kenya, I think literacy is 79%. That's probably on the higher side in Africa. Zimbabwe may be maybe higher. Nigeria is around 59%. Ethiopia is probably around 45% or so. So populations moderately educated, if you want to say that. But people, what we've seen a lot of from where I sit, where money is going to the wrong things. Money is going into a lot of technology where it's a solution looking for a problem. The problem is there are a large number of people in these countries, 70%, who are in a particular industry, agriculture, and agriculture is getting a very small percentage of the capital flowing into these countries. And so if we want this to truly be an opportunity, if we want to realize the demographic dividend, I think more capital needs to be flowing into the parts of the economy that need it the most in these countries is agriculture and its manufacturing.
And tie that place to the youth bulge.
How does it play with the youth bulge? So in most African countries, more than 50% of the population is below 25 years of age.
That's correct.
Those people are in kind of a, physically speaking, they're the strongest that they're going to be. And as we all know, ag and manufacturing is extremely labor intensive. someone who's older, it's going to be a lot harder for their body to endure that level of work, unfortunately, for the amount of time and period that it would be required. And so these younger people are much more able to bear that kind of work. And I'm not saying people should be doing hard physical labor all day, every day. There are ways you can mechanize agriculture. There's ways to mechanize manufacturing to make it less labor intensive. But you have a workforce that's eager, that's able, and willing to do this, and you can take advantage of that in order to lift these countries up, to take advantage of the amount of young people you have available for this kind of work.
Do you have any thoughts to add to that?
I think that if those young people are ignored by their governments, they can be a threat. But if they are attract enough attention from their government, so if the government use the appropriate policy to take care of this demographic changes, they can be a real fuel for the future development, because they are representing the future workforce and the future entrepreneurs at the same time. So as future workforce, this workforce needs to be trained, and this workforce needs to have the appropriate training that is adapted to the market needs. And as entrepreneurs, they need to find an entrepreneurship environment that is encouraging for them. That means with less bureaucracy, more justice, and with more infrastructure too. So if the government implement the right policies to create more jobs, this youth can be the real fuel for the future.
One thing that seems, go ahead, David.
Yeah, perhaps it's important to know the threat is not just for those countries, but it's for the entire globe. When the world kept not very engaged on a fragile state called Somalia, continued on until the youth grew, who never went to school, and produced a hub of pirates and stopped a very international maritime highway from operating, and then the world moved in and solved it. So the problem of youth can be a big threat, and it's important for investors and others, and governments and all, to be mobilized towards investing in programs that can make the demographic dividend an opportunity for the African people. Otherwise, it can become a reason for the world to be much more worried in the days to come, especially because if you don't harness the youth bulge into productive work, then there will be fragile states that can become a problem to the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Now it's time for what's usually the library's part of the program, and that is questions from the audience. And so I'm going to ask you to pose your question. Please identify yourselves, and we won't be handing around microphones, but I will repeat your question to make sure that everyone on both sides of the room can hear what we're talking about. And so I think if you just raise your hands or stand to ask a question, that would be good.
Lynn, I feel obliged.
All right.
Bob Castro with the Secretary of State's Office of Global Partnerships. Part of the lead-in was talking about innovative partnerships. A lot of what I heard is sort of new thinking, but I'd really love to hear if each of you has an example of something, a public-private partnership that's not being done the traditional way. And particularly since you talked about education and vocational training, opportunities where the government can be a catalyst or a lever, but not either primarily funder or doing what is inherently governmental, which is the government-to-government regulatory and those sorts of things.
So the question is about, to ask the panelists to comment on, about innovative public-private partnerships that are not being done in the traditional way, correct? Please, any volunteers?
I think so much is being done that we don't know about, and it's not really well publicized, and you've got to dig within the annals of the government and everything that they're doing to really understand how. There was a program I learned about a couple of years ago, and I haven't really seen much of it. I think it's called Lions, under the State Department or under USAID. I can't recall exactly, but based on my understanding, the idea was that companies in the U.S. would be working directly with entrepreneurs and early stage businesses in developing countries, sharing this technical knowledge similar to the Partners in Food Solutions program that I mentioned earlier. I think that it's a tremendous opportunity. What we're seeing is, especially in the consumer packaged goods area, as these companies start to look at Africa as a growth market, they want to establish a footprint there. Typically, some companies have tried and failed for various reasons. The ones that are approaching this in the right way are looking at businesses that are already operational on the ground and acquiring them. And typically they're paying very high multiples for those businesses. And they could, I think they could make a much better business case for first assisting businesses that are already on the ground, gain the knowledge and know-how of how to operate within that sector, whether it's sourcing from the right way, producing your products, getting it to market, effectively figuring out which segment of the market you want to attract before they then go in and acquire those businesses. I think companies like Kellogg and Procter & Gamble, Unilever, who are all looking at these markets as expansion opportunities, could benefit greatly from providing that technical skills to entrepreneurs in these markets first, and then as they scale up, can then enter in either form joint ventures or acquire them outright. And there's an opportunity that will pay dividends commercially, but it also does a lot of good with respect to building up these economies, employing people, paying them fair wages. So that would be
perhaps an example. The government of Kenya and Farm Concern International, where I work, supported by the Rockefeller Foundation, have a program we call Youth in Agriculture and Trade Enterprises, where we work with high school students to promote the understanding of agricultural enterprises as an opportunity of after school. You may appreciate that universities are not many, and the opportunities for Kenyan young people to proceed to university is pretty less than 10% for those in high schools. Now, where do those others go? They go looking for work wherever. Now, we need to promote agriculture as being cool and an option for career at vocational level. And that is done innovatively using games, for example, sponsoring tournaments that are provincial, and then making the opportunity for women to promote agriculture as a direction to take as an opportunity. And that's why FCI is in the game. In the same, we also promote champions across the country who are succeeding in being successful business people in agriculture, whether it's in production or value addition and others. And that seems to awaken the sense of, you can branch into investment in the villages. I want to emphasize again, the problem lies in us investing in a way that the youth back in the village can engage in agricultural enterprise there where they are, rather than them expecting it. The other thing is also the need for real training that is practical. Ability to build an enterprise in agricultural sector ain't that easy because of the various variables within it. And we have a program we call African School of Agribusiness, which is to promote ability to understand the step A, B, C, D of running an enterprise, whether at farm level, distribution level, validation level, whichever level. You need to get people who are potentially wanting to get into it to understand it practically, because business is business and it's not easy. Now, I may want to say, perhaps in a final way, that it's also important to know that investment, where return on investment is very guiding, can really bypass agricultural enterprises because they are risky, they are not very attractive in many ways. Perhaps they need to have guarantees for investing in agriculture, which can open opportunity for employment as well as be able to do, and that kind of guarantee fund, for us to borrow or to acquire machinery machinery or technology is something we think ought to be encouraged. There is for credit, perhaps time we pushed it to opening up agricultural sector investment.
Carla, in a sense, partnerships are your business. Do you have anything that you want to add to this?
No, nothing else to add. Most of the partnerships that I've seen until now working appropriately, and the main things that I see is that when we have, for example, technical assistance or facility or something like that, it's we use it for a certain period of time, and the follow-up after, when the funds are used, we can ask questions about how effective it will be for the next decades or the next generations.
We have a hand up over here.
Yes.
Please.
My name is Quentin Gray, and I'm actually a private consultant. And I have a comment and I have a question. The first comment is I heard all of what you said earlier, and I know about the history of U.S. agriculture. I have a great knowledge. And everything you said, we have experienced in the United States. Some of the people leaving the farms, coming to the cities, etc. All of those things we have experienced. But what I wanted to comment on is concerning the public-private sector partnerships, and that's what we call it in the United States, because we don't have that public sector working together. In some fields, it might not matter as much, but in agriculture, we don't make progress unless they both work together. And then I wanted to make a comment about the youth and what is really going to make the difference at the end of the day. If they can sell the product and make profit. And so my question is, what have you seen on the African continent helping the youth, even farmers in general, get their product to the market where it has profitable level?
The question is, what have you seen that will help farmers get their products to market? Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Please expand.
Yeah.
One of the things one of the actions that was made by some that are implemented by some countries to help the farmers to get their products to the market is what we call the tripartite contracting between the farmers, the processors, and the banks. So some countries and governments play a role to implement that kind of partnership between these three bodies, and it helps a lot for the farmers to access financing. And when they access financing, they can have harvest. And since they have this contracting with the processors, their products can be bought with a predetermined price almost, and they are sure that they will have clients for all their harvests. So I think this is one of the most effective measures.
Well, thank you for the comment, objectively stated. We work in Farm Concern International with a model we call the commercial villages model. We aggregate farmers into villages that are pre-existing, and those villages include the younger population and all members of the community. And we get them to understand their business of whichever value chain they're involved in. And then we bring in buyers from across the markets, whichever markets, and get them to understand what the buyer or the private sector expects in terms of volumes, in terms of quality, in terms of type, and then get to challenge the smallholder farmers to invest their money, their own money, into meeting what the private sector guy wants, because in that way they'll get the particular value already promised. Because they are gathered in a village that was pre-existing, they have reason to trust each other, and therefore the members of society that are exposed become leaders in offering advice and negotiation. In the end, and in our 13 years of work, villages become deal makers, and they get to understand private sector expectations, and they cash on it. It's a journey. It doesn't happen in a day, because as you know, suspicion is rife, and every people in the village thinks businessmen are thieves. They want to steal our money, they're not paying the right price. In the same way, private sector cannot use their money to come and organize smallholder farmers. It's very expensive, doesn't make business value. But as you organize smallholder farmers into commercial villages, as we call it, and that they become attractive to buyers who come in and offer premium price because the aggregation costs has been resolved, the quality assurance has been resolved, and the numbers are adding up. That does work in our experience.
Yeah, there's a couple of examples we've seen. So, just last week, this partnership between the United Nations, East African governments, and the Indian government. There's an Indian spices company that has agreed to buy chilies from smallholder farmers throughout East Africa, and so someone's aggregating the chilies from these farmers and selling it to this spice company, and they're paying fair market prices for it. So that's a great example for how a farmer can see where their products are going to be going, who's buying it, and what price they're going to get paid for it. Two of the companies we've invested in are working hard to pay farmers fair prices for their products. So one is a company called Moringa Connect that works with farmers in Ghana who are growing moringa trees and buying the leaves and the seeds from them at fair market prices, processing those into oil and powder that's used. The powder is used as a nutritional supplement for food fortification, and then the oil is used in cosmetic products, and selling that to international buyers who are then incorporating those in their products, paying those farmers on average $1,200 to $2,000 a year more income than they would otherwise get. Another is a tomato processing company that's now working with smallholder farmers in Nigeria to help them increase their yield so that they can meet the global average, meet and exceed the global average, and buy their tomatoes and process it into tomato paste. And then the last one is a company in Kenya that, this was fascinating when I heard it, but when you go to the grocery store here in the US, a banana costs about 49, 50 cents a pound. In Kenya, if you went to an informal retailer or a grocery store, the banana cost probably 20 cents more. And yeah, really. And why is that? There are several middlemen within that value chain. Yeah. And so they're buying the banana from the farmer on average for about 8 to 10 cents a pound. And then every step of the way, they add their rent to it and end up selling it to the grocery store, and the grocery store needs to earn, or the retailer needs to earn their margin. And so the farmer is losing about 50 cents in that transaction. So how do you cut in the logistics chain, how do you cut all those middlemen out and reduce the amount of players in the space between the farmer and the end retailer? And there's a company that's taken a really innovative approach to that, and paying farmers on average double what they would get paid from a broker, and selling it to the retailers for less than what they would pay, and then capturing the value. So there are people trying to address that exact problem and allow the farmers to earn more for what they're growing.
Thank you, Eeyler. We have time for one more question, and I think we'll take one from this side. Did you have a question?
Yes. My name is and I'm from Zambia. I want to pick up on one of the speakers, and he talked about the youth from yesterday being very different from the youth from today. And as such, we need to look at the situation differently. Because the typical face of the farmer in Africa has not changed much. What the youth, young people, they have changed. They're more savvy now, they're more innovative, whether formally educated or not, they have access to so much technology that is happening around the world. And as such, we can get them by talking about training, by talking about a whole lot of stuff that we're talking about now. All that is important, but you have to think about the dollar, the euro, the dollars, whatever currency. They have to see the profit in the activity itself. And as long as they see agriculture, the face of agriculture as the core farmer in the community left behind, they are not going to go back to agriculture. So we need to redefine agriculture. Because when we talk about agriculture today, we're focusing on food production.
Yeah.
We're focusing on using all your energy to till the land, etc., etc. We need to redefine agriculture. Where in agriculture will they be? We have so many problems in Africa. How do we have a conversation with the youth to get them engaged to be innovative? We have nutrient deficiencies. How can we talk to them? How can we have a conversation with the young people? These are the problems. And we know that we have solutions in Africa. How can we engage with you? And coming from West Africa, we talked about Somalia and Cyprus. We have another problem. Where are our young men? They're leaving. They're going through the back way to Italy, etc., etc. And most of them are dying.
Yeah.
Right? I read an article, a newspaper article, where the woman in one of the communities in the Gambia was talking about that all the young men from that particular community are there. So, if you want to get young men to stay in the rural communities, it has to be with rural development. They have to have a reason to stay, not where they are. Thank you so much.
So what we're talking about here is the fact that we still have farmers working in very traditional ways, but we have young people who are looking for something more. And there are other forces that are attracting the young people, and we have to have rural development in order to make this work. Do any of you have any thoughts you want to add to that? And we have about 2 minutes left.
Maybe, I think your passion is common to all of us, except that the answers are not easy, and we need to look for those answers. It is true that in the Mediterranean, our 3,500 young children die trying to cross at Lampedusa to Italy and to go and look for work, and that's pathetic. And we need to get them to work back home. That's why I repeat my statement that we need to make opportunities available back in the rural areas for them not to go to town and be enticed to go to treacherous trips like crossing the Mediterranean. Excuse me. But I would want to say also that needs to be fairly choreographed. The way to undo that needs to be choreographed. It is true that our youth may not, the average age of a farmer in sub-Saharan Africa is about 60 years, because really no one does it thoroughly. However, rediscovering agriculture that is cool to young people is not difficult. It needs to be focused upon so that does happen. Of course, there is those that can appreciate the ICT and the deal therein. I was working with a young lady in the slums of Nairobi who was doing fish fingers that she sells through the internet in Michigan. And she would get buyers and send them. I think that is there, but that's a little of it. The bulk of the youth will need to have a concerted effort by all of us to ensure that there is ability to make an enterprise, an income, an employment back in the rural countryside. Otherwise, the problem in Lampedusa, in the Mediterranean, and the gangs, and the terrorism, and so on, can easily be here for some while. I would also want to urge that building a mechanism that targets to make sure that only available economic activity in rural Africa is uptaken by the youth is programmatic, it is investment, it's governmental, it's everybody's concerned, here and away. And I think that's what I would urge us to keep thinking and looking for solutions. But there are opportunities, there are examples. Ira and my sister here has alluded to some that are emerging in different countries. I think following that would be a part that I would want to emphasize that we do follow. In where I work, in Farm Concern International, we keep looking for opportunity to build programs that target the youth. That is important. Can those of you who have decisions and ability to influence decision makers, next time there is some person wanting some funds from wherever you are to go to African people, do inquire whether that includes uptaking the youth into gainful employment at the rural countryside, because opportunities, their food is eaten there, consumption is there, and so on.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
I will let you quickly wrap
that's all
up.
right. I
There,
think
I'll
that was a
finish.
very good note to end on.
Okay, very good, I agree. Time has come to move on to another segment of this program, so I'll ask you to join me in thanking our panel.
Thank you.
Thank you again to the panel, and I'm very happy to introduce our next speaker who will offer a brief flash talk on the global farm market supply chain. So Andrew Mack, who is the principal at AM Global Consulting, please come to the stage, and group, please join me in welcoming you.
I very much appreciate the reference to bananas earlier. That's awesome. Thank you. You did. It's very rare that someone sets up your talk quite so nicely. Let me see if I can get this. Hit B to start. Okay. There we are. Great. Well, thank you all very much for being here. It's a real pleasure. My name is Andrew Mack. I'm the principal of AM Global Consulting, which is an 11-year-old firm based here in Washington that works with technology and partnerships to create solutions focused on the developing world. And as it turns out, I'm here to talk about bananas. The 1 in 3 that's produced by smallholder farmers. So we got 3 here. I'm here to talk about the 1 in 3 that isn't being enjoyed by consumers. And specifically, I'm here to talk about a new approach to getting that banana to market, putting more money in the hands of small farmers and more food on the table of a hungry world with the new farm-to-market ecosystem that we're calling Agri Mobile. Does this one go? Great. Okay. So I'm sure you've all seen what I've seen. I've spent more than 30 years working in the Global South, and all around you see people like the smallholder farmer that is sitting there with the bicycle on the right. You see him pushing his cart, you see him pushing his bike, sitting by the side of the road with literally bags of goods, waiting for the goods to be picked up, all while the fruits of his labor, quite literally fruits in this case, are going bad before his eyes. It's not a trivial part of his world. According to the FAO, post-harvest loss is some 30 to 50% of all that he produces, 1 in 3 bananas, or equivalent to $150 billion a year around the world. So what's $150 billion between friends, you might ask? Well, in 2016, $150 billion is what Chevron took in. It's what AT&T made. It's the gross national income of Finland. It's a lot of money. The challenge is that the farmer, he needs to be more than a farmer. When it comes down to it, he needs also to be a transporter. He needs to be a banker and a broker. And he's trying to do all of this disconnected from markets. And that's simply inefficient. It's simply too difficult to do. Fazla, can you do me a favor? Can you hit these? Thank you. Okay, next slide, please. In a macro sense, there may be few problems this big around the world. Taken together, smallholder farms would be the largest employer on Earth. As a group, smallholder communities would be the largest nation on Earth, larger than China, larger than India. But our population isn't static. It's slated to grow to over 9 billion by 2050. While we are spending around $5 billion every year, our estimates show, to raise yield, yield is only half of the equation. We need to complete the transaction and get the food profitably and quickly to market. We know that this lost revenue comes with real consequences. Think about it in terms of migration, in terms of food insecurity, in terms of health and political stability. We talked before about the idea of employment. We also know that as long as the incentives are not there for farmers, they're not going to invest in seed, they're not going to invest in fertilizer, and they're not going to invest in additional labor if they're losing this much of their crops. The hard work of production is done. The sticky point, really, when it comes down to it, is logistics. And that's what we plan to address with a new app-enabled platform that we're calling Agri Mobile. So Agri Mobile brings together 3 proven technologies. On-demand transport, think like Uber Pool, but for crops, to facilitate the pickup and delivery of product. Cell phone banking, to help make secure transactions and agree on pricing. We talked before about the fact that so much of the production price is lost. Absolutely, if you are the person sitting at the side of the road waiting for transport that may or may not come by, you are a price taker. You don't want to be a price taker. You want to agree in advance. And the third piece, one of the innovations is microinsurance. How can we limit risk in an environment where people don't know each other? How can we make it possible, not just for groups that have come together to take advantage of this, but also people who haven't met before? And we can do this by creating microinsurance. At least as importantly is the data that's generated, data that can be used by governments to try to improve infrastructure, to try to improve security, as well as companies who need to reach these markets. The system will allow farmers and transporters to find each other. This is the key, to arrange pickup and the terms of the transaction and to buy insurance if they want it, with the goal of making it possible to pick up more food more efficiently and when it is freshest. Now, we recognize that reaching a disparate group of farmers will be challenging, and it was mentioned in one of our earlier presentations. The good news is that there are an awful lot of people out there who stand to benefit, who have a real interest in working with us to capture this lost value. Think about co-ops, who need to get more money in the hands of their members. Think about transporters, who want to go out but don't know whether there will be goods that are available and how much, what the quality of the goods and what the quantity of the goods will be when they get there. Think about mobile operators and banks, helping them to get into rural markets and make money while building coverage. This is really crucial because they have business models that are built around the cities. How are they going to make money in rural areas? And think about governments and donors and the amount of money that's currently being spent to try to reach and improve rural economies. We hope to partner with all of these groups, and all of them have something to gain through Agri Mobile. And we know that today's system is really inefficient. It isn't capturing the value, the hard work that today's farmers are putting out. We know that tomorrow's consumers will need even more food. They'll need better food. And today's way of getting to the market really just isn't getting the job done. Today, we're missing 1 banana in 3, but to feed tomorrow's market, we're going to need 4 bananas or more. By combining proven technologies, we can improve the global farm-to-market ecosystem and unlock this trapped value for farmers, for transporters, for consumers, and for others. That's our goal with Agri Mobile. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that creative presentation, and I tweeted your bananas to help me with all points. I didn't use the hashtag, but it's good. So next, we have our final panel for the afternoon, and I'm going to ask a few questions of our panelists and then open the floor for discussion. So the panelists now are William Masiko, who is Executive Director of Grow Africa. And Grow Africa is an initiative of the World Economic Forum, the African Union, and the New Partnership for African Development. And it is a public-private partnership committed to realizing the transformation of agriculture on the continent. And Dr. Gabisa Ejikta, who many of us know well, is a distinguished professor of plant breeding and genetics in international agriculture at Purdue University, and he's also director of their Center for Global Security and a World Food Prize laureate. So gentlemen, welcome, and thank you for being here. And maybe we could start with William and ask him to talk a little bit about how governments are transforming how they handle policy, but also how they transform institutions in order to achieve this. We certainly know that a lot of institutions in any country, especially governmental institutions, are somewhat overly bureaucratic and maybe a little bit stodgy. So tell us some of the good news stories about how some of this is changing as it relates to policy for agriculture.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Catherine, and thank you very much to the Chicago Council for having me on this. I feel very honored to be on the panel with such a distinguished moderator and certainly such a distinguished co-panel member as Gebiza. I think I'll answer your question in two parts. There is certainly good news, but there are also opportunities. I think the good news is that today agriculture is on the agenda of policymakers and private sector as never before. Today, you have heads of state, government leaders, CEOs, all talking about the potential of agriculture and how important it is to get the policies right, to get the investments right, that even just 10 years ago just didn't exist. Okay, so I think that is certainly good news, and we should applaud that. Secondly, I think for the first time, about 13 years ago, the Comprehensive African Agricultural Development Program, CAADP, was passed by the African Union heads of state. 3 years ago, they reviewed the progress on CAADP. And CAADP is basically a set of principles, and it provides a framework for agricultural transformation in Africa that all African countries are invited to follow. And the good news is that an African agricultural status report that is published by AGRA on an annual basis in 2016 found that those countries that had subscribed to the CAADP principles early were making more progress than the ones that hadn't. So for the first time, Africa has a comprehensive plan, a roadmap, if you want, to transform African agriculture, and it works. I think the opportunity is that not all the countries today, and I think David made an excellent point, Africa is a continent made up of 55 countries with different cultures, different levels of development, different economies, languages, and so forth. So not all the countries are interpreting CAADP in the same way, not all of them have the capacity to implement it in the same way. And so that remains a challenge. The uptake on CAADP is still slow, but we know that it works. Secondly, the issue of capacity continues to be a problem. I think, although if you talk to policymakers, and particularly the heads of state level, at the policy-making level, everybody is saying the right thing. Everybody is saying how much they want to invest in agriculture. Everybody's talking about is strengthening capacity and institutions. But if you go 2 levels down to the people who actually have to make this happen, you have huge challenges of capacity. You find that there's the challenge of capacity in a broad sense, so you don't even have enough people who have the knowledge, but also those who are there don't have the depth of knowledge that is required to bring the transformation that is required. And I think thirdly, the enabling environment. Private sector investment is something all governments want, and particularly in agriculture, all governments are asking today, how can I get more private sector investment? I've built roads, I've put in agri-poles, I've done all these things, and yet the private sector still doesn't come. I think one thing that everybody has to recognize, an enabling environment for the private sector is very important. It doesn't matter whether it's agriculture or industry or any other sector. If the enabling environment is not right, if private investors, particularly if they're foreign, cannot get their capital out or their profits out, they're not going to come regardless of how good your infrastructure is. If your policies are not certain, if there's policy uncertainty around foreign investment, around agriculture and what you can and cannot do, your private investors are not going to come. Capital does not like uncertainty. And so some of those challenges remain. I'll stop there and perhaps wait for some more reactions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. We'll come back to some of those issues in a minute, but Kabisa, if we can go to R&D for a few minutes, and especially your involvement in R&D over many years. You've been doing your own work, your own research in Africa. You've also been involved on groups like the Board of International Food and Agriculture Development and advising USAID, as well as many other organizations. So you've seen firsthand changes that might be being made in Africa with state or national research facilities. So can you tell us a little bit more about how they have evolved in terms of providing better support for farmers, and what still needs to be done in order to help to strengthen national research operations to be in the proper state?
Yeah, I echo the comments that have been made by William in terms of all the positive development that have taken place in general, economic growth and more opportunities, and particularly this incredible infrastructure development that have taken place in the continent. And we'd probably talk a little more even about expansion in higher education and the opportunities for the young that on the surface are there and emerging, and yet because of some of the things that William had indicated, and those opportunities have not been really realistic for a large number of people. But going back to the specific question that you asked me, I think significant gains have been made in a number of ways in transforming African agriculture. But to engineer Africa's transformative agriculture, you don't only need these positive economic development that have taken place and finances and capital, as you indicated, but you also need new knowledge, appropriate technologies, and innovations, and then, as William indicated, making sure that we have the right policy environment, regulatory issues, to make sure these opportunities have been realized. While significant gains have been made in Africa since independence in the last 50 years, I continue to feel that Africa's human capital and institutional capacity have remained too rudimentary and inadequate to support the aspirational goal for the 21st century transformative agriculture that we would like to see. And that, if I'm lamenting the point that have been made over and over again, but that not having human capacity development taking place in the manner it needs to be, and strengthening institution in Africa continues to be a tremendous bottleneck. One, just focusing on human capital, that the lack of wisdom to strategically plan out what I have heard others call the 3 R's of human capital development, that is recruitment, recruiting the right kind of young men and women for the right kind of job, including their aptitude, their training, their skill sets, and aligning them with the job that they're wanting to do and able to do. And then not having the culture to retain individuals that have earned some leadership skills, some experience, and stay them and keep them in the system, not only because they could build upon that experience and leadership skill that they've gained, but more significantly, they would be there within the public service program to be examples for the young ones that are coming behind, so that they have aspirations to be professionals like them. And then the culture that is really lamentable is not having a culture of reward and people there in the system. So this notion of retention, recruitment, retention, and reward, that culture is really not there. As a result, you don't have the kind of people that would stay in the system, as David and others were mentioning earlier, to show to the world and to themselves and to their nations that there are opportunities within their own boundaries to be able to provide opportunities for the poor as well. Institutionally, I think Africa's institutions have generally been woefully weak and sparse across the board, from education, research, and extension, and as well as throughout the wide range of impact pathway along the value chains, the policy issues, the regulatory issues that that have been mentioned. And while young men and women are being trained and not getting good education, and yet the policy environment is not supportive of small businesses to develop locally or foreign direct investment coming from outside. So the net result has been that, as we all know, there's a lot of us that have been involved in technical assistance program that donor agencies put in place in the absence of all of these local institutional programs not developing, a makeshift kind of arrangement that really doesn't have the traction on the ground and the sustainability that is lacking. And so I think as to the positive development that have been mentioned, I think maybe we can get back to see the opportunities that have come out from the last 5-10 years of incredible developments that have taken place in the continent.
Okay, thank you. Let's explore just maybe with one more joint question before we open the floor, how we connect young people back in. Now, you made some references to that, Gabisa, in your answer, but the last panel talked about young people in agriculture, but now let's talk a little bit more about young people in R&D and extension in the government in agriculture. How do we make the connection to bring more young people into this process? How do we make it more interesting, and how do we and more compelling, I suppose, might be a better word. And as part of your answer, could you also address the issue of being sure to bring up women as well as men into this whole process?
One particular organization that have been created deliberately for this purpose, and I had the privilege of serving in that organization in founding it, with the Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa. And that Gates Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, created this to provide this connection that have really been proven in places where it's been given a chance. And that is that you connect agricultural education with research, and then the results of research are taken out to the farms through the help of extension services and so on. This is the land grant mission and organization that have really been a great example, not only in its success in the United States, but as I said, everywhere that it has been given a chance. And part of the connection that was made deliberately in the AGRA program was to make sure that the connecting linkages are not left to chance, but also built into that program by developing agro-dealership and seed industry development, and then making sure that working with the government, these technologies that have been generated in the research organization are given the chance to connect through these private sector enhanced or complemented extension service type activities, working with shops in the rural communities carrying inputs like seeds and fertilizers and so on. But while technically that has been really interconnected and worked very well, but the point that I'm making, why it has not really achieved as much gain as it could have been, is for this lack of internal local capacity and institutional strengthening that have been there. But even with that, in the last 20 years or so, and certainly the last 10 years since the creation of AGRA, the number of seed companies that have been created and providing input to the farmers have increased. And today, there's some 20% of farmers in Africa have improved seeds and fertilizers and making sure. And that has boosted yield. But again, then, that this enabling environments that William is mentioning the institutional capacity that are not there to function, and instead in many places are continuing to be obstacle. And that is the one that I like to draw attention to, in that there is a dialogue that is necessary between the donor communities and the donor governments and agencies, as well as the national programs in many of these countries, to really have a heart-to-heart dialogue in terms of what is it that the government is achieving and what kind of assistance they need from outside, what are the responsibilities for the national government to make sure that technology and innovations have a path for success to making a difference in the lives of people. So it's a story of, a glass half full, but there are some positive things happening. And again, maybe I don't want to take all the time, but we'll get back to about the gender agenda, an agenda that you certainly among the people that I know have been relentless about advancing that. And again, that is a glass full that is developing as well.
That's the second time we've heard the glass is half full, so 2 panels in a row. We'll keep it going.
It was a family member that said that,
yes.
isn't it?
William.
Thank you. There is so much that has been said about the youth, young people being attracted to not just agriculture, but many things, and how do we solve this? Now, I'm fortunate enough to have 3 children who are young adults. Well, the first 2 are young adults, one is a teenager. And, I see the youth through them. And everything that I know about what the youth think, I see through my children. And one particular story stands out. My youngest son, when he was about 11, wasn't doing particularly well in school, as 11-year-olds tend to do. And, my mother and I sat him down and said, look, you're not, really trying as hard as you could. Your friend Tom is doing very well. He's your best friend. Why can't you be like Tom and perform like him? And he answered without thinking. He said, Tom has very clever parents. So the one thing that we know about the youth today is that they don't want to be conventional. They don't want to do things like everybody else. I think that the one thing I do know, whenever I ask my kids, what do you want to be? In the old days, they would say, I want to be a lawyer, accountant. All they want to do is own their own business. They want to be entrepreneurs. I think that is something that we should tap into. And I think, my sister asked about how redefining agriculture. Actually, I don't think it's redefining agriculture. I think the idea that you create a policy environment space where agriculture can be seen as a business, you will not just attract young people, you will attract a lot of people back to agriculture. Put the infrastructure in place so that the produce can get to market. Make markets work. Again, the biggest challenge you have in agriculture with post-harvest loss, as Andy was talking about, is some of this produce just can't get to market because the infrastructure doesn't exist. It's produced, the productivity is up, they've had a good crop, but they have to throw it away because it couldn't get to the market. Markets don't function. And this is an important aspect of making agriculture work. So I think thinking about agriculture as a business, creating that policy space and making it possible for people to actually look at it as a business, you will attract young people to that space.
Does that require also the government to consider agriculture like a business? Because I think sometimes the government just thinks, farmers out there, they don't necessarily think business or entrepreneurial in that context.
Oh, absolutely. I think, the biggest impediment to the growth of the agricultural sector, in my view, has been, government or lack of government leadership in this space. There is no sector that is more heavily regulated and that is more affected by poor policies than agriculture. And the reason is that agriculture is a multi-sectoral. For agriculture to work, you need not just the Ministry of Agriculture to be functioning and focused. You need the Ministry of Finance to ensure that you have the investment. You need the Ministry of Infrastructure to ensure that the roads are there. You need the Ministry of Trade to ensure that you can have cross-border trade particularly, but also that agriculture is seen as a business so that people can trade, their markets where to take their produce. So you have to make sure that all these actors are acting together from a government perspective. And not all governments look at it like that, and that's the challenge. I think that you have some today who are beginning to look at agriculture that way, and certainly CADAP, that framework that I spoke about, does require governments to take into account the multi-sectoral nature of agriculture and ensure that they're aligning their policies and, more importantly, their investments along those multi-sectoral approaches.
Thank you. We have time for a few questions, and the one hand I see two more over here. Okay, is our speaker from just earlier, please. Let me ask everybody to make very brief questions so we can get as many in as possible.
Sure. William, you mentioned the idea of having smart parents, and I would suggest that part of the issue is also having smart children. A lot of the children who've gone to the cities are now more technologically aware than their parents are now have an awareness of the kind of lifestyle that they would like to take back with them to the countryside. So part of what we're trying to do is to create the conditions in which they can live a modern lifestyle, but out in the rural areas. So the question that I have for you is that if you're going to get governments, which tend to be unwieldy beasts, to focus on one area of policy, one policy initiative that you recommend governments do to try to make the new modern agriculture happen, what would you recommend?
Great. William, would you like a minute to think about that? Because I want to ask the other people, and then we can answer the questions together. Was a hand in the middle up here? Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Ruby. I'm an agrologist and agricultural economics student. My question is, and I'm really glad that you asked a question about the extension, because we talk a lot about farmers and entrepreneurs, but we didn't talk much about the fact that they also have to be supported by extension. And we see data like 27% of African youth study humanities and when 2% study agriculture. So I'm wondering, when we're talking a lot about building farms and having farmers, but not that much about the extension that are supporting them, how do you see that going? And how can we encourage much more people to actually study and maybe join extension and research in agriculture in the African continent as you?
Good question. Thank you. There was another question in the back. Yes, sir.
My name is Nate Lawson. I work for CARE. My question is about multilateral investment in agriculture, and how do you ensure that it's quite inclusive and create this kind of win-win as well? And obviously, I'm also thinking about doing a economy, right? So how do you make sure that those kind of investments are really green as well? And also, I want to use the lens of women or gender, and how do you see that playing out?
Okay, one more here. Yes. Okay. Two more.
My name is Donald from Kyoto University. Next generation.
Do you mind speaking up a little?
My name is Donald. I'm from Kyoto University. I'm the next generation delegate. My question is, you were given some suggestion that agriculture should be treated as a business so that it can attract more young people. But my question is, as about 96% of agriculture or farming in Africa depends on rainfall, that means rain-fed agriculture. So what's your suggestion? Because unreliable rainfall, it brings to unreliable output. That means variation between season and season. By that way, the producers, they cannot meet the demand of the buyers, because sometimes they need like contract buying of the product for processing and sale of the output. So what is the point?
Thank you. One more, and then we'll finish with the question. We'll start with the answers. Gentlemen here.
I'm Joe Mwewaze from Open University. I'm also the next generation delegate. My question is to Yepisa. How would you suggest the youth should look at the GMOs? Because there is a lot of controversy.
That's a good question. Okay, so William's going to start, since the first question was addressed to him, and answer any that you'd like, please, and then we'll move to Gabisa.
All right, thank you very much, Andy, for your question. Look, that's a tough one. Where should governments focus on? And if I had one answer, I think I would take the example of Ethiopia and the creation of the commodities exchange. I fundamentally believe that the solution to many of the agricultural problems that we have in the agricultural sector is, to get agriculture working commercially. So connecting smallholders to commercial value chains, thinking of agriculture as a business. I believe that the market can solve a lot of those problems. But the market is not going to be able to solve those problems if the market itself isn't working, if you don't create a platform for the market to work. And I think the way that the Ethiopian Commodities Exchange has managed to do that, I mean, the idea that if you thought about the US, for example, that a government would own a stock exchange or a commodities exchange, people would think you're crazy. But in Ethiopia, it's worked. They set up this commodities exchange, and today, all the coffee in Ethiopia is today traded on the commodities exchange. It has increased in farmers' incomes significantly. And so I would say that, to me, and I'm not saying that commodities exchange is the only solution, but to me, if governments focused on making markets work for agricultural produce, I think that would be one sort of silver bullet that I think would solve a lot of problems. I think I'll just talk about the rain-fed agriculture and the idea that, because rain is so important and agriculture is a seasonal business, I guess, that, it might be a challenge to think about it as a business. Well, I'll answer this way. I worked for 20 years for the Coca-Cola company, doing business, really, trying to build the business of selling Coke in Africa, in many countries in Africa. And then I can assure you, every time it rained, our sales went down. Now, you could plan for that a little bit because, the rainy season, but the rain doesn't always follow the seasons. And, in business, you plan for risks. And you price for risks. And so now I completely understand that for a smallholder farmer, planning for risks and pricing risks is not as easy as that. But there are many solutions that are around. I think Gebiza talked about Agri and the work they're doing around blended finance, where you're trying to look at solutions for smallholder farmers around mitigating risk. Okay, so some of those are things that could be done. But to me, I think unless farming becomes profitable, unless it's something that can become a livelihood and can be seen as something that is a commercial activity, we will never solve some of the food security challenges, leave alone the poverty and things challenges that we have today. I'll let Gebiza.
One thing that I would like African governments to do about the private sector is to recognize that government can't do it all. That there is a good division of labor. And there is a partnership, there's a complementarity. There is a role that there are things that the private sector can do better than the government. And there are also support services and an enabling environment that is a responsibility of the public system. To the extent that they develop better understanding and working together in the future, society and communities are going to be better for it. This insincere, half-hearted commitment to private sector that is prevalent in Africa is really a major disease. And that as soon as they begin to recognize that it is a partnership, that they can work together, yes, to the extent that they can watch out for concerns that they have, it is their right, they could do that. But in terms of training nearly 1 million graduates a year in some countries and not employing 20% of them, and then if opportunities were there for local enterprises and outside foreign direct investment that would open up employment opportunities for gainful employment, the government is better, the country is better, society is better as a result of that. But that fear and suspicion that continues to exist, and that half-sincere commitment is really the huge bottleneck from benefiting society at large with the good that would arise, or could potentially arise from that. And the question about extension, I think, the recognition that agricultural systems, changes in agriculture, I think it was David that mentioned earlier, are slightly different from changes in other systems, including health. The health system began to use an extension system way long after us, and they make it work, in many countries very, very well. But the fact that in agriculture, unlike health and other systems, that you can't pull a magic bullet by giving a medicine or giving seed overnight to a farmer, but you need to be working with the farmer regularly and bring in feedback, because there is another element that works against us in agriculture, and that is a technology that is developed in any particular laboratory may or may not work in one environment as well as it did in other environments. So that lesson of processing that and working with communities slowly requires, yes, a blend of maybe private sector motivated activities that may exist where opportunities lead that way, but a great deal of it is public service programs. There are now very many countries in Africa that have made the necessary investment, and as many of you know, as young people, men and women, are assigned to the field of agriculture because extensions are usually not very well supported, very poor in infrastructure, and the last graduate in the lower tier of the graduating class is the one to be assigned to extension, and they're frustrated there because they can't do much, and so that needs to change. Ethiopia have made significant investment in extension service, trained 65,000 extension agents, but at the same time, these extension agents are spread around the country. They're not very well supported. They're not connected to research. They're not making the kind of contribution that they would have made if they were, very well supported to be effective in the task that they're assigned. The last question on GMO, I would like the young to appreciate that this is a technology that has significant power in solving some problems that conventional science cannot address, but it's not a magic bullet. It's not a particular product they need to be focused at, but it's the power of the science that is emerging, and so Africa needs to be investing in human capital development so they will learn more about the science, and then when they do that, I think it was Euler that said in the earlier session that we don't need to be thinking about technology. We don't need to be a supply side at that and taking a technology and trying to find a problem that it could solve. I think it is a match that is necessary. You need to define the problem that you like to solve, and then what among the arsenals that you have in conventional science and biotechnology is the one that is likely to address that. When society begins to appreciate the science for what it is, and then the doors of opportunity would open up for the science.
Thank you. But if you could answer it in 30 seconds, because we have one minute left.
Okay. I think there was a question about multilateral investments in agriculture that hasn't been answered, and it wasn't very clear to me what the question was, but I think I heard you say that, we need solutions, as I talked about earlier, about a multi-sectoral approach to agriculture. And you're absolutely right. Of course, the Ministry of Finance needs to be increasing the amount of budget allocated to agriculture. The Ministry of Trade needs to make investments in ensuring that markets are working. The Ministry of Infrastructure needs to be doing work around creating roads and putting in place markets and those kind of things. So absolutely, yes, we should take a multilateral, multi-sectoral approach to agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to thank Bisa and William for their thoughtful comments today. Thank you. And then a special thanks to all the speakers this afternoon and to all of you for coming and participating. And we look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow at the Ronald Reagan Building for the symposium. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. A pleasure. Your kids don't know how influential they really are. If you're getting your guidance from your kids.